All right, let's go to this story now. SABC News correspondent Nick Harper joins us live now from Washington, D.C. for the very latest on President Donald Trump's telephone conversation with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. This is part of the ongoing efforts to find a lasting ceasefire there in Ukraine. Nick, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. So have the two leaders spoken?
They have, and we're told that that call is still ongoing. It began at 10 a.m. local time here in Washington, D.C. It's now 12:20. So if they are still talking, and we haven't been told that they have finished their conversation, they would have been talking for 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've had a couple of updates along the way in the form of messages on social media. One of them coming from Dan Scavino. He's an assistant to the president, deputy chief of staff at the White House. He put a post on X about an hour into the phone call in which he said that the phone call was underway, that it started at 10 a.m. local time, and that it was going well. He then updated about 45 minutes later to say it was still ongoing. We're waiting for a further update either from him or from the press secretary Caroline Leavitt, or of course from Donald Trump himself, because the expectation is off the back of this call, he will jump on his own social media platform, Truth Social, to give some sort of update about how this call went.
And especially if anything on Truth Social is posted is to go by, certainly quite a lot of updates that he posts there on a regular basis. But as these two leaders are speaking, Nick, there's a lot of mistrust, right, between Ukraine as well as Russia, given what the situation has been in the last few years. But let's talk about some of the sticking points in the lead up to this telephone call.
Well, that's right. And certainly sticking points that President Vladimir Putin of Russia is hoping to try and overcome during the course of this phone call. We know, according to Donald Trump, that certain things had been agreed in advance. Just yesterday, Donald Trump said that he was very much looking forward to the call. He seemed quietly optimistic, but he also said many elements of the final agreement have been agreed to, but much remains. He didn't detail exactly which had been agreed on and which still needed to be sorted out. But inferring from his language over the last couple of days, land and territory and power plants are things that have already been talked about and may already have been agreed. Just on the issue of territory, the US has been saying for some time it does not foresee the giving back of territory by Russia back to Ukraine. So that seized territory is likely to be held onto by Russia. Of course, Vladimir Putin would like that. Ukraine definitely wants it back. It is saying that its red line is its territorial integrity, the sovereignty of Ukraine, and any seized lands over the last 3 years should be given back by Russia. Then there's the issue of power plants, not mentioned which ones, but in particular the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's the largest in Europe, and it's one that Russia captured back in March 2022. It's held onto it, therefore, for almost the entirety of this conflict. It's a big bargaining chip, something that Russia wants to hang on to, something that Ukraine wants to get back. Things that we know are also sticking points, and from a US perspective are off the table. NATO membership, something that Ukraine dearly wants, but that both Russia and the Trump administration, in stark contrast to the Biden administration, is against. And then there's a question of arming Kiev. One of the red lines for President Putin going into this phone call was whether or not there would be continued military assistance from the US and from Western allies in Europe to Ukraine, because President Putin has said he's concerned about the idea of a 30-day ceasefire. He feels that Ukraine might use that as an opportunity to rearm themselves on the battlefield, and therefore he wants, if he signs on to this 30-day truce, a complete end to military shipments being sent to Ukraine. That's something that he's hoping to win during the course of this call. It's unclear whether that's something that Donald Trump will agree to, though.
Yeah, quite a lot still up in the air, Nick. Thank you so much for that update. And let's see then when the telephone call does wrap up, if then we will see an agreement or possibly a much more need for deeper conversation, given the skepticism that's also been expressed by Ukraine. Thank you so much for chatting to us. That's my colleague, the SABC News correspondent, Nick Harper, joining us live from Washington, D.C.